Hey guys, tonight we step into a world carved by towering peaks and endless mountain trails, the vast Andean empire known as the Inca. Imagine sprawling cities perched high on cliffs, terraced fields cascading down steep slopes, and a civilization that ruled with astonishing precision across rugged terrain. You probably won't survive this without gasping a few times, because communication here wasn't a simple phone call or email. It was a high-stakes relay race against altitude, weather, and geography that would test even the most determined messenger. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to drop your location and local time in the comments. I'm always curious where you're tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge alongside ancient Inca roads, stretching thousands of miles through snow-capped passes, dense forests, and dry deserts. The air thins, your lungs burn, but ahead a runner waits. His feet barely touch the earth as he prepares to carry a message across impossible distances. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Inca Empire, at its peak in the 15th century, covered over 2,500 miles along the Andes, making it one of the largest empires in the world. Communication was vital, but incredibly difficult over such diverse and treacherous terrain. You pause to admire the road network, marveling that without wheels or horses, the Inca built paths so efficient that messages could travel faster than in many contemporary civilizations. Here's your quirky tidbit. Instead of written letters or scrolls, the Incas used a unique system called quipus knotted cords that conveyed information in a complex code. It's like a secret language woven in string, part math, part memory, and part mystery. Historians still argue whether quipus functioned as a full writing system or merely a mnemonic device. Some believe only select officials could interpret these knots, making the system both powerful and enigmatic. You inhale the crisp mountain air and watch as the Chasqui legendary Incan runners dash off into the distance, each carrying messages vital to the empire's survival. And as you settle in, you begin to understand how this peculiar postal system wasn't just about messages, it was the nervous system of an empire, unlike any other. Next, you'll explore the immense challenges the Incas faced in keeping this vast communication network alive against the harshest conditions on Earth. You trudge higher into the Andes, the air thinning the terrain, growing more unforgiving with every step. Imagine trying to send a message across this jagged peaks, slicing the sky cliffs, dropping away into mist and weather that can switch from blistering sun to biting cold in minutes. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Andes Mountains presented one of the most challenging landscapes for communication in the ancient world. With elevations often exceeding 12,000 feet, few animals thrived, and the Incas famously forbade the use of wheeled vehicles. You hear the crunch of your boots on stone steps carved centuries ago, marveling at the ingenuity of the Inca engineers who blasted roads into sheer rock faces, built suspension bridges of woven grass, and carved switchbacks that zigzagged around impossible slopes. Here's your quirky tidbit. The Incas didn't just build roads, and they built stairways. Thousands upon thousands of stone steps linking villages and fortresses so steep that runners had to leap and bound like mountain goats to maintain their speed. Historians still argue whether the Incas developed their postal system primarily as a means of political control, or if it also served religious and social functions. Some scholars see it as a military necessity. Others emphasize its role in unifying diverse peoples. You watch clouds swirl below you, mist curling like fingers around distant peaks. The physical barriers alone made messaging a feat of endurance, speed, and nerve. No ordinary courier could survive this journey. And yet, the Incas succeeded. How? Because they designed a system unlike anything the world had seen, built on human legs, woven codes, and a vast network of roadside inns known as tambos. As you catch your breath, you sense the heartbeat of the empire in the pounding footsteps of the Chasquis, faster than any horse-running relays that spanned hundreds of miles each day. Next, you'll meet these legendary runners and discover the extraordinary role they played in carrying messages that kept the empire alive. You watch as a slender figure bursts into view over the rocky trail, a Chasqui, the Inca's legendary runner. His body lean and hardened by altitude, his breath steady despite the thin air he carries. Not just a message, but the lifeblood of the empire itself. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Chasquis were elite relay runners who raced across the empire's vast network of roads, covering distances up to 150 miles a day, by passing messages from one runner to the next at tambos, or relay stations. You notice the messenger's bundle, a small, tightly wrapped package, sometimes a quipu, sometimes a verbal message, sometimes an object secured carefully to his back. No paper or scrolls here. The Incas had no written language. Instead, their messages were woven in knots and carried in memory. Here's your quirky tidbit. Chasquis reportedly wore light sandals called ojotas, made from woven reeds or leather optimized for speed and endurance. Legend even says they could run so fast that their feet barely touched the ground, as if they flew over the earth itself. Historians still argue about the exact speed and efficiency of the Chasqui system. Some suggest messages could travel over 150 miles per day, rivaling the fastest couriers in the ancient world. Others believe the system was slower, but more reliable, due to its intricate relay structure. You see the runner reach a tambo in Adobe Station, perched on a mountain ledge where another Chasqui waits. With a brief handoff, the message is passed, and the new runner takes off, disappearing like a shadow into the rugged landscape. This relay system was the empire's nervous system, its arteries carrying information vital to governance, military action, and social cohesion. Without it, the Inca's vast territory would have fractured into isolated mountain clans. Here's where you feel the awe at human endurance and discipline. How entire communities depended on these runners, how the survival of an empire balanced on the speed of human legs. Next, you'll explore the tambos themselves, the bustling hubs that fueled and coordinated this incredible postal network. You step into a tambo, now a roadside inn, perched precariously on a mountain ledge or nestled in a green valley. The air buzzes with activity as Chasqui arrive, exchange messages, and rest briefly before setting off once more. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Tambos were strategically spaced, about 10 to 15 miles apart along the Inca roads, providing food, shelter, and fresh runners for the postal relay, ensuring messages moved swiftly and continuously. You see Chasquis unloading their packs, handing off quipus, intricately knotted cords that carried complex information, and consuming steaming bowls of maize porridge to replenish energy before the next grueling run. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some tambos were stocked with medicinal plants and coca leaves to combat altitude sickness and fatigue, a kind of ancient endurance aid for the relentless runners. The coca leaf was sacred, used both ritually and practically. Historians still argue whether tambos served primarily military and administrative purposes, or if they also played roles as centers of social exchange, commerce, and cultural dissemination. Some see them as strictly utilitarian, others as vital nodes of Inca society. You wander past stacks of dried potatoes and maize stored to sustain runners through harsh seasons. The scent of burning wood mingles with the sharp mountain air, and the chatter of runners echoes off the adobe walls. Here's where you appreciate the efficiency behind the simplicity, a network of well-stocked inns operating in perfect coordination to support one of history's fastest communication systems, all without wheels, horses, or written language. You spot an official, perhaps a curaca, overseeing the tambo's operations, ensuring messages are logged and runners assigned with precision. The entire system runs like a well-oiled machine, vital for the empire's survival. And as you watch a new runner strap on his light sandals and set off into the swirling mist, you realize tambos were more than mere rest stops. They were lifelines connecting the empire's diverse peoples. Next, you'll unravel the mystery of the quipu, the knotted codes that served as the Inca's written language and essential messaging tool. You now hold in your hands A quipu, the knotted cord that's both the Inca Empire's message and mystery. It's a tangled skein of colored strings, each knot, loop, and hue, packed with meaning that only a trained few could decode. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Quipus served as the empire's primary record-keeping tool, encoding numerical data census records and even narrative information through an intricate system of knots and colors, unique in a culture without a traditional written language. You run your fingers along the cords, marveling at the craftsmanship. Each knot represents a number or concept. The spacing communicates order, and colors denote categories from livestock counts to tribute owed. It's an ancient binary code of sorts, woven with silk and cotton. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some scholars propose that Quipus may have recorded stories or genealogies, functioning as mnemonic devices rather than literal writing like a musical score or a complex memory palace crafted from string. Historians still argue whether Quipus represent a fully developed written language or remain a sophisticated mnemonic system. Some evidence suggests elite specialists called quipucamayaks could read Quipus almost like books, but full interpretation remains elusive. You imagine the quipucamayaks, Incan scribes and record keepers studying the chords with expert eyes, translating the knots into decisions that shape taxation labor and military logistics across the empire. Here's where you realize how critical Quipus were to the postal system. They carried complex data, compactly reducing the need for lengthy oral messages and enabling efficient relay by shaskis. You watch a runner carefully handing a quipu to his successor at a tombo. The message is fragile, woven in thread, but vital to governance. One misread knot, and entire regions might suffer miscommunication. And as you look closer, you notice the beautiful irony. The empire's power rested on something so delicate, so ephemeral, as a knotted string. A true web of communication spun from human ingenuity. Next, you'll walk the empire's roads themselves, magnificent engineering feats that made such messaging possible across impossible terrain. The Inca roads stretch before you, like veins of stone and sweat, winding over peaks, plunging into valleys, and bridging rivers with daring suspension bridges. These pathways are the lifelines of the empire's postal system. Without them, messages would drown in the silence of mountains. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Inca built over 25,000 miles of roads, known as Capac Ñan, connecting distant parts of the empire through some of the most challenging terrain on Earth, facilitating the swift movement of people goods and information. You run your hand along the weathered stones, marveling at how roads were carved into cliff faces, stabilized with retaining walls, and surfaced with crushed rock to withstand rain and erosion. Each step echoes the ingenuity and sheer determination of Inca engineers. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some bridges were made entirely of braided grass ropes stretched across deep canyons and rebuilt every few years by local communities in a ritual blending engineering and tradition. These suspension bridges could hold hundreds of people swaying gently over dizzying heights. Historians still argue how centralized the road construction was, whether the Inca state dictated every detail, or if local populations contributed significantly to the building and maintenance. Some see it as a top-down imperial project. Others highlight regional cooperation. You look across the landscape and imagine shaskis sprinting these paths, baton in hand, feet pounding in unison as messages leap from one runner to the next. The roads are more than infrastructure, they are the nervous system of an empire. Here's where you feel the deep connection between land and governance. These roads not only linked cities, but also symbolized imperial power, uniting diverse cultures under a common network and shared destiny. A mountain breeze carries whispers of past runners, their footsteps fading into the stones. You sense the weight of countless messages borne across this vast, rugged terrain. Next, you'll explore the challenges faced by this incredible postal system and how the Incas overcame natural and human obstacles to keep their empire communicating. The mountain air grows thin and chilly as you venture deeper into the story of the Incan postal system's relentless challenges. You can almost feel the sting of biting wind and taste the dryness that threatens to sap even the strongest runner's strength. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Inca Empire's vast geography included everything from arid deserts to frozen glaciers jungles, to rocky cliffs demanding extraordinary endurance and adaptability from both their roads and messengers. You imagine chasquis battling sudden storms, leaping across ravines, and scaling steep passes while clutching fragile quapus or verbal messages vital to imperial order. The terrain was unforgiving, and missteps could mean disaster for both messenger and message. Here's your quirky tidbit. Despite forbidding terrain, no wheeled vehicles existed on Incan roads. Instead, the system relied entirely on human runners and llamas for cargo, an impressive feat of biological and logistical ingenuity. Historians still argue how much local communities contributed to overcoming these challenges. Some suggest the empire's reliance on regional labor and knowledge was key to its success, while others emphasize the strict imperial organization of maintenance and support systems. You picture relay runners passing messages seamlessly at tambos, fueled by coca leaves and maize porridge, their bodies honed to perfection for this arduous task. Every second counted. The empire's fate often hung on timely communication. Here's where you appreciate the Incas' extraordinary human logistics. Chasquis weren't just athletes. They were vital cogs in a communication machine that thrived despite nature's fiercest tests. A whisper of wind carries echoes of ancient voices urging you onward as you prepare to discover just how fast and efficient this postal network truly was, outpacing rivals even in more technologically advanced civilizations. Next, you'll uncover the remarkable speed and precision that made the Incan postal system legendary. You watch a chasqui vanish over the mountain ridge, the very image of speed and stamina. His footsteps barely disturb the dust as he races to deliver news that could change the fate of entire provinces. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Incan postal system was astonishingly fast. For its time, messages could travel nearly 150 miles in a single day thanks to the relay system of chasquis and the vast network of well-maintained roads. You imagine a message passing from one runner to the next with military precision, like a baton in an endless race, where each leg of the journey is a vital link in the chain. No need for written words. Speed and accuracy were paramount. Here's your quirky tidbit. Chasquis were said to have trained from childhood learning to navigate treacherous terrain, while memorizing the complex codes of quipus, carrying messages not only across distances, but through cultural and linguistic diversity. Historians still argue how much oral transmission complemented quipus in the system. Some believe many messages were verbal, encoded with mnemonic devices and local dialects, while others emphasize the growing importance of quipus as a quasi-written medium. You feel the incredible coordination that allowed such rapid messaging across mountains, rivers, and deserts, where even a delay of minutes could mean disaster for military campaigns or political decisions. Here's where the system shines as a marvel of human organization and endurance, a feat rivaling or surpassing contemporary postal systems in ancient Rome or China. The wind rushes past your face as you imagine the urgent words carried on this network, orders to generals, announcements of harvests, news of rebellions, all weaving the empire together through swift communication. Next, you'll see how this system kept the empire's sprawling governance intact, bridging cultural divides and maintaining the Inca's iron grip over diverse peoples. You now stand at the heart of the Inca Empire's governance, where messages from distant corners arrive like lifelines, keeping rulers informed and responsive. The postal system isn't just about speed. It's the glue holding a vast, diverse empire together. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Incan administration depended heavily on its communication network to coordinate tribute collection, labor conscription, military movements, and even religious ceremonies across thousands of miles. You see officials in Cusco, the empire's capital, poring over quipus and receiving reports delivered by chasqui, making decisions that ripple down mountain valleys and jungle paths to tiny villages. Every knot in a quipu represents a thread in the fabric of empire. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some scholars believe that the quipus were not just record-keeping devices, but also encoded complex information about social hierarchies, regional allegiances, and even census data, helping officials manage a population estimated at around 12 million. Historians still argue how centralized the Incan bureaucracy truly was. Some assert that local leaders held significant autonomy, while others emphasize the shrewd organization of the empire's core rulers in directing resources and labor. You imagine how messages about a failed harvest or looming rebellion would travel swiftly, prompting timely responses that prevented the unraveling of imperial control. The communication system was less about distance and more about cohesion. Here's where the postal system reveals its political genius. It wasn't just delivering words, but enabling control, binding together disparate peoples under a single imperial order. You hear whispers of the Caracas local leaders who interfaced between central authorities and indigenous communities, ensuring that messages weren't just heard, but understood and acted upon. Next, you'll explore the spiritual and cultural messages carried on this network, how the Inca wove faith and tradition into their communications. The sacred pulse of the Inca Empire beats not just in political commands, but in religious reverence. Messages carried along the roads carried more than orders. They carried the gods' will ceremonies and cultural unity. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Inca were deeply religious, and communication included instructions for festivals, rituals, and offerings to Pachamama, Mother Earth, and Inti, the Sun, God whose favor was essential for the empire's prosperity. You stand amidst a crowd gathered in a plaza awaiting news of a ritual date. A chasqui arrives delivering word from Cusco that the Inti Raymi festival will be celebrated soon, a signal for the entire empire to prepare offerings and ceremonies. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some tambos doubled as ceremonial sites, where runners and officials paused to perform prayers, burn incense, or make offerings, blending the practical with the spiritual in a seamless rhythm. Historians still argue how much religious messaging influenced political cohesion. Some scholars believe these rituals reinforced loyalty and identity across diverse ethnic groups. Others see them as tools of control wielded by the elite. You watch as dancers and priests interpret the messages, their movements telling stories passed down through generations, while the communication network hums beneath both spiritual and administrative threads woven tight. Here's where you feel how deeply culture and governance intertwined in the Inca system, where a message wasn't just words, but a thread stitching together faith, power, and community. A soft breeze carries the distant sound of panpipes, and you realize that in this empire, communication was as much about connection as command. Next, you'll dive into debates among historians about how sophisticated and complex the Incan postal system truly was, how much we still don't know. The mist of time lifts only partially as you peer into the scholarly debates swirling around the Incan postal system. Despite its apparent sophistication, much about the network remains shrouded in mystery and conjecture. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The primary sources on the Inca postal system come from Spanish chroniclers and archaeological evidence, both incomplete and often biased, making definitive conclusions challenging. You see historians poring over ancient ruins of tambos, studying quipu fragments and analyzing road layouts, piecing together a system that once hummed with life, but now exists largely as puzzle pieces scattered across centuries. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some researchers speculate that quipus could have encoded language-like information beyond numbers, possibly narratives or administrative directives, though no one has yet cracked a full Rosetta Stone for quipu. Historians still argue whether the chasqui system was a strictly state-controlled monopoly, or whether local communities played more significant roles than previously thought. Some suggest the empire depended heavily on regional cooperation, while others emphasize centralization. You watch debates about the speed and reliability of message delivery. Was it as fast as Roman couriers, more efficient due to the relay system, Or were messages sometimes delayed by terrain weather or political unrest? The answers remain elusive. Here's where you sense the tantalizing balance between fact and myth, the Inca postal system's legend, growing as much from imagination as evidence, a testament to human fascination with communication itself. A dusty archive holds maps, reports, and accounts, each promising answers, yet offering more questions, reflecting the complexity of an empire built on knotted cords and human endurance. Next, you'll trace the decline of this remarkable system, as the Spanish conquest unraveled the empire's intricate web. The sun sets on the Inca Empire's golden age as the shadow of Spanish conquistadors creeps over the Andes. The intricate web of roads runners and quipus begins to unravel under foreign boots and new rulers. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Spanish conquest in the 16th century dismantled many of the Incas' political and communication structures, replacing them with European systems and languages that erased much indigenous knowledge. You walk through abandoned tambos, now their adobe walls crumbling the once bustling relay stations, silent, except for the wind whispering through cracked stones. The runners who carried the empire's lifeblood vanish into history. Here's your quirky tidbit. Despite the conquest, some quipus survived, hidden in remote villages, or repurposed by local communities, acting as secret codes preserving Incan culture under colonial rule. Historians still argue about how much of the Incan postal system was lost versus adapted. Some believe it vanished almost entirely. Others see traces influencing later Andean communication practices. You imagine how the empire's vast geography became a prison under new rulers, its roads used for conquest instead of connection. The silence that replaced the runner's footsteps is heavy with lost knowledge. Here's where you feel the tragic finality. The collapse of a system unmatched in its time, overwhelmed by a foreign tide that rewrote history. But the story doesn't end here. The spirit of the Incan postal system lingers, echoing in modern Andean traditions and inspiring new ways of connecting across challenging landscapes. Next, you'll explore how this ancient network's legacy survives and shapes communication in the Andes today. You step into the present-day Andes, where echoes of the Incan postal system still pulse beneath the rhythm of daily life. Despite centuries of change, the legacy of those ancient roads runners and knotted cords continues to influence how communities communicate across rugged terrain. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Many Andean communities today maintain traditional relay running systems for transporting goods and messages, particularly in remote areas inaccessible by modern vehicles. You watch a group of villagers passing baskets of fresh crops and messages along narrow mountain paths, their feet swift and sure on uneven stone trails mirroring the ancient Chasqui tradition. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some areas, locals still use quipus as ceremonial objects during festivals, preserving the symbolic significance of these knotted cords, even if their practical use has faded. Historians still argue how much modern Andean communication owes directly to Incan practices versus adaptations influenced by colonial and contemporary innovations. Some see a living continuity. Others emphasize transformation. You hear the laughter of children running alongside mules carrying messages between villages, much like their ancestors did centuries ago. Technology may have advanced, but human endurance and community remain vital. Here's where you sense a profound resilience, how a system designed for survival centuries ago still inspires connection and cultural identity in the modern world. A local elder explains, "Our roads are old, but the spirit of the runners never dies. We carry the past with every step." Next, you'll consider how the peculiar postal system of the Inca continues to inform modern ideas about communication, community, and endurance. You follow the faint trails of the Incan postal system as it weaves through time, revealing lessons that resonate far beyond the Andes. The network wasn't merely a method of communication, it was a profound expression of human connection, resilience, and adaptation. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Incan postal system is often cited as one of the earliest and most effective long-distance communication networks in the pre-modern world, unparalleled in speed and organization. Despite lacking written language or horses, you imagine modern planners and technologists studying the system, drawing inspiration for networks that must function in challenging environments, from remote mountain villages to disaster zones where traditional infrastructure fails. Here's your quirky tidbit. The ancient relay system's emphasis on human endurance and community cooperation has influenced contemporary approaches to disaster response, with some organizations adopting similar relay-style communication methods in inaccessible regions. Historians still argue about how much the Incan model can be applied today, with debates over the balance between high-tech solutions and low-tech human networks in modern communications. Some advocate for blending both, inspired by ancient ingenuity. You witness how the principles of redundancy, relay, and localized knowledge inherent in the Incan postal system echo in current technologies, reminding us that sometimes the best solutions come from centuries-old wisdom. Here's where you realize the peculiar postal system's true legacy. It teaches us that communication is as much about people as it is about infrastructure. That even in the most daunting landscapes, connection thrives through cooperation and shared purpose. A final breeze carries whispered messages across the mountains, reminding you that though times change, the human spirit's drive to connect remains constant. Next, you'll prepare to close this journey with reflections on endurance, ingenuity, and the enduring power of communication across all divides. The sun dips low behind the Andes as you stand quietly at the end of this long journey, feeling the weight of countless footsteps, messages, and stories carried across these ancient mountains. The Incan postal system was more than a network. It was the heartbeat of an empire, pulsing with life, resilience, and unity. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Though the Incan Empire fell centuries ago, its postal system remains a testament to human ingenuity, an extraordinary example of how communication can bridge vast, difficult landscapes and diverse peoples without modern technology. You breathe in the cool mountain air, imagining the chasqui's swift legs pounding stone paths, tambos bustling with life, and quipus knotted with vital information, a system that connected people not just physically, but socially and spiritually. Here's your quirky tidbit. Even today, some hiking trails in Peru follow parts of the old Inca roads, and local festivals celebrate the ancient runners with races that honor their legendary speed and endurance. The spirit of the chasqui lives on in these traditions. Historians still debate many aspects of the postal system. But one thing is clear: the Incas created a marvel of coordination and human effort that continues to inspire admiration and curiosity. You glance toward the horizon, where mountains meet sky, feeling the threads of connection stretching across time and space, reminders that even in the harshest environments, people find ways to reach each other, to share news, to build community. Here's where your journey gently slows, carried on the quiet strength of those ancient messengers who ran not for glory, but for the survival and unity of their empire. As the stars begin to twinkle above the peaks, you close your eyes, wrapped in the soft embrace of history's enduring web. Sweet dreams.